All right, everyone. Hey, welcome to another tough conversation with Blake and Cameron. I am Cameron, and that's my brother Blake over there. We blog at www.blakeandcameron.com, and we tackle the tough issues of how do your goals and your values align with the way you're spending your most precious resources. We really believe that you don't just spend your money, you don't just spend your time, but you really need to have a framework for how you want to do those, how you want to spend those things, and your values and your goals really help you do that. And today we're diving into a complicated topic for a lot of people, but we really feel that it's not that complicated. So we're going to dive into some issues here with that. Blake, you want to introduce yourself so people can get to know you?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it, Cameron. Hey, everybody, I'm Blake, and I'm an active duty Army officer, and I live here outside of Washington, D.C. with my wife and two and soon to be three kids and our dog. And it's been a blast here working with Cameron and talking about these great issues that are so important to all of us and aren't necessarily always at the forefront of our mind, but so much of it plays such a role in our peace of mind and just kind of how we feel we're doing and how we feel about the future too. So Cam, I'm looking forward to spending a little bit of time with you this afternoon here.
Yeah, definitely. And for everyone else too, I am Cameron and I live out in Denver, Colorado. Recently moved out here in July. I was also in the Army for about 5 years, but recently transitioned out to take a stab at full-time entrepreneurship, which brings in a host of issues with finances, money. Am I making money? Am I not? Am I putting a lot of money into a business and not making a lot of money? So those are some of the issues that make budgeting, at one point seemed really complicated to me, but really looking forward to seeing what sort of fruit comes out of this for me, for you, Blake, and for the listeners out there. So thanks everyone for listening. Janelle, I see you just joined us. So we hope that we can provide some value to you. If you got questions or issues about budgeting as we go along, definitely hit us up there in the comments. Blake's sort of going to be hosting an MC in this one. So Blake, what do you want to know?
Yeah, Cam, well, the first thing I wanted to ask you was why'd you even start budgeting? What made you start? And when did that happen?
Sure. Great question. It started a lot more recently than I'd probably like to admit. I will say that for all of my adult life, I've been good with money. I've never been in significant debt or anything like that. And I've never had a lot of super financial stressful events like a job loss or anything. And so I was always felt like I was good with money, and, my savings was growing, my investments were growing a little bit, but I got married last year in May, and we decided to move to a whole new state, leave some of our friends in the jobs that we had in Kansas City and move out here to Denver for a host of reasons. But one of them was, like I said, to jump into entrepreneurship. And that meant that my wife, Lindsay, was going to be primarily supporting us while I went off on this grand adventure. And as most people know about entrepreneurship, sometimes you can make multi-millions of dollars and sometimes you don't make anything or you lose a lot of money. And so with that uncertainty looming, Lindsay and I really felt that we needed to ramp up our knowledge, ramp up our commitment to budgeting so we could actually, understand where our money was going and how long we could sort of stay on this uncertain trajectory before we were in, dire financial straits.
Okay. Yeah. So no particular emergency, but mainly to avoid any upcoming emergency.
Exactly. Yeah.
One thing you said was interesting though. So you had this mindset of, okay, uncertainty coming up. Why did the budget be the tool, was the tool to, help you do that? What did you know about it, or what did you heard beforehand that made you think, if we do this, then we will avoid, future emergencies?
Sure. I think the main thing was just demystifying and putting some borders to this concept of we have jobs, we make money, and then we go spend it and do fun things and buy food and pay for rent and pay for our utilities and things like that. And so as I dove into sort of some of the budgeting options and was reading up on different things, I began to realize like, hey, I'm not actually sure where we're spending each and every dollar we make. And if I knew that we were spending even $10 here and maybe $100 here, but wasn't quite aware of it, how in the world was I going to make like informed choices when Lindsay and I were like, hey, can I actually not, I need to stop this entrepreneurship and get a full-time 40-hour-a-week job. Or, oh no, we're doing well because these tens and $15 increments added up to a lot that sort of gave us enough safety and enough cushion to move forward and allow me to pursue this opportunity that I really wanted.
Okay. So it sounded like, I mean, you were going to use the budget as the way you were going to gain a better understanding of where you stand and a better sense of awareness of where your money is going or will go.
Exactly.
Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so I guess last summer you made the dive. You said, okay, let's start budgeting.
Yep.
What was something that, looking back now as an experienced budgeter here for maybe a year or so, what was a big mistake that you made that's something that's easy to avoid, but you didn't know at the time? What was a mistake that you guys did at the start?
Yeah, I think we probably made a few mistakes that made it a really overwhelming process that we delayed, oh, maybe we'll tackle this in a few weeks or something like that because it seemed overwhelming. But I think the major issue that I would love for people to avoid is don't think 100 steps down the road, right? Budgeting is pretty simple and straightforward when you think about it. But what I did is like, okay, well, I'm budgeting now. That means I need to have specific percentages where all my money is going to go, like 10% here, 15% here. And I need to understand investments and I need to understand tax implications. And so I was thinking, all those things are good and probably necessary at some point. But I was saying that this was a huge, triple XL pizza that I needed to consume all at one time. And instead, what I would highly encourage everyone that's watching is, hey, break it down into bite-size bits. Say, hey, what's the first thing we need to do? And then do that. And I would say sort of the first step of budgeting is how much money are you making, and then where's that money going? So how much money are you making? You don't start budgeting until you sort of know that. But don't worry about where's all the money going until you actually understand what your inflow is, what your paycheck looks like. Is it consistent? Every 2 weeks you're getting paid this? Does it fluctuate? Are you in some sort of freelance business where you're not sure? But do that, and then you simply move on to the next step. The next logical progression is, okay, so I have this money, and then where do I do it? What do I do with it? So yeah, again, to answer the question in one sentence is, I was looking at the huge big picture and thought I had to have everything figured out, which just wasn't the case.
Okay. So you just felt like, like you said, the huge big implications and, like you mentioned, tax and where does that money go to invest and trying to make all that.
Sure.
So instead, the simple step of here's the money that we have and here are the things that we need to pay for. Is that a fair summation?
Yeah, exactly. And a budget doesn't get more complicated than that, really. It's two things. It's inflow and outflow. And if you focus on that, then you're really going to understand that the other things, they're going to be good, but this is the baseline. This is the foundation where any other beneficial thing has to derive from that. And for our listeners here, I'd love to see, have you done budgeting? Do you have any major mistakes? Are you similar to me, or was I sort of off base there?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So days or weeks later, you get over this big fear and you're into a progression.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe month number 2, it goes a little bit better. What's another lesson that you learned along the way? What was something that y'all did and were like, okay, that was right?
Yeah. So what we began to do is not lump everything into huge baskets, right? Like food, bills. Those are important things. That's where our money is going, right? But we decided like, hey, we need to be a little more specific here, because if we just say food and food has $300 in it, how can we make any sort of informed choice about that down the road? And so we broke food down into restaurants, down into groceries, down into coffee, like Starbucks and things like that, even down into like our alcohol purchases. I'm in Colorado, great beer out here, so I want to pursue those things, but I wanted to put those in specific categories, because what we found like in our first month is, we maybe had, just 5 or 6 big things, our rent, our utilities, our bills, and like a cell phone or something. But really jumping into the specifics and narrowing that stuff down really was incredibly insightful to us.
Okay. Well, so good. So then you got specific, and like even beer or wine or whatever you wanted to call it or something like that.
Yeah.
So you got into the specifics. So as you did that, what was something that you found either surprising or you said enlightening? Like, what'd you find by doing that? How did that help you?
Yeah. Well, my goodness, Blake, it's shocking where our money goes, to things that I never thought it would go to. I was just sort of used to, I make money, I save some money. Hopefully, if things are all right and I'm doing okay, my savings account grows. But I was shocked to learn that, my money is going to a lot of things that I never mentally accounted for, even though I felt that I was really good at that. So, for example, just last month even, Lindsay and I had to renew our passports. And it was $110 for the application fee. There's a lot of postage. There's the photograph you have to take, and like never in a million years would I have thought that I would spend money on passport fees or postage for those types of things. I was in the Army just like you are right now, and they're like, you don't have to worry about medical copays and paying for, prescriptions and things like that. But I went to the doctor 2 weeks ago, and lo and behold, I had like a $15 or $20 copay, and I would have never like categorized that, or never would have given a second thought to like, hey, each month I need to allocate some money towards a doctor copay. I need to allocate some money towards prescription medicine. Yeah. And so it just really blew me away. And even this past month, January 1, right? My credit cards had their annual fee. I enjoy doing some travel credit cards. And I think that's a benefit for me, maybe not for everyone, but like some of them have an annual fee, and they came due. And that's money that I would have never realized that I was spending, because it's not the most tangible. So.
Okay. So again, I'll try and sum up what you just said. So by digging in and getting specific, and it sounds like and then tracking as you go, then it was you were just gaining knowledge of where that money was going.
Exactly. It's sort of just like a flashlight being like, oh, money goes here, goes here, goes here.
Yeah. How is that different than, like just looking at your statement or whatever and seeing that? How does that differentiate when you did it within your budget framework?
Yeah, really good question. I would always review my credit card statements. I'm a nerd, and I sort of enjoy looking at some of that kind of stuff. Yeah. But it was always just passive. It was reactive. It was, hey, okay, it looks like I spent money here, or what does this term on my credit card statement mean, and when did I spend $38 there, right? And so now when I'm budgeting, it's proactive, and I say, hey, I have to allocate money here, or else I'm not going to be able to meet savings goals, or my income to outflow ratio will not be in a healthy spot, right? I want to make more money than I spend. And if I'm not, and so in my budget, that is the tool that helps me understand and make that actually happen.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's, that makes a lot of sense. So that proactive versus the reactive, which I know you and I've talked about that a little bit, but
sure.
Yeah, you kind of see that in those tangible things.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
What about this idea of, okay, I made a budget, I made it for January, and all of a sudden I blew this one category, or like you said, I didn't even know I had to renew my passport right now.
Sure.
And I didn't budget $110 for this stupid thing. And so budgeting sucks because it just freaking blew up, and that's just life, and you can't plan for everything. So for you, I mean, what works for that? How do you get around that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because that happens almost every month. And I've been doing this for many months now, and I still get shocked by something that pops up and says, hey, spend money on me, or friends coming into town, and that means we're eating out a little bit more, or we're hosting and doing a big dinner that we just didn't plan for, right? And so the biggest thing is you have to give yourself grace. You got to roll with those punches. You got to understand that that stuff comes up. And as you progress in budgeting, the easiest solution is give yourself a buffer. Have that buffer sort of built in some way, unplanned expenses, or the random thing that might pop up has been key for us to minimize the stress over that. And so when something pops up that we need to spend $200 on, like a car repair, it's okay. It's either already budgeted because we planned ahead, or it's simply, okay, we got to figure out where we can pull money to pay for this, or we have it stashed away, and it's just roll with it. It's, we'll live another day type of thing.
Yeah. So, so for you, if your category blows up, then it's not the end of the world. But what do? You have to react to take money out of what you had planned earlier, I guess, right? You're reacting to those changes.
Sure. And and if you don't react, then why are you budgeting in the first place? I think is something to understand, because if you don't let your budget, shape your actions, then what's the point of spending any time on it whatsoever? So for us is, okay, we have to pull money from another category. So we have friends coming into town. That means I'm buying less beer, so we can put my beer money over into let's go out to eat with our friends, or let's cook them a nice meal type of thing. But if you don't do that, then if you don't actually have those conscious steps and take action on what your budget is telling you, then there's no point in doing it. Don't waste your time. Is what I would say.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say a lot is, okay, your budget you're learning a lot about yourself and your habits from your budget. But then with those lessons that you're learning, then you apply it to either that current month's budget or the next time you go around. So I mean, for you now, maybe not the best example, but passport fees, that's not an annual expense necessarily, but in 5 years you're going to have to do that. So maybe you make a note, maybe you put that on your calendar, lesson learned. Or
exactly,
surprise monthly or annual expense, your $89 to your credit card. Okay, well, that's coming again in 12 months. I can do, 89 divided by 12, and now that's just a little bit of my monthly budget. Last month, it wasn't in there. That wasn't a category. Lesson learned. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's forecasting it out. And that's why I say, don't group them into big categories like bills, because if you do that, you're never going to find those hidden things that are requiring your money, right? You're never going to find your annual Amazon Prime. You're never going to find, hey, tax time, car registration fee, which we've been dealing with, the DMV, on that kind of stuff. And it's been more expensive than we thought. And so I already have it mentally there and in my budget written down, hey, start saving up for your $300 car registration fee next December.
Yeah, I think the term that just keeps coming into my head is that awareness. So your awareness has now been raised by doing this practice, and it didn't take a whole lot of effort on your part to raise your awareness of your money. So for you, it was start tracking where your money goes, or being more aware of what you're spending your money on, and then have a plan for it. And with that, you've had to shift and move and change, make some different decisions and that kind of thing. But with all of that, your awareness is raised. And so then that informs your future decisions as well. Makes sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're hitting the nail on the head. And again, the title of this blog is that budgeting is not that complicated, right? And so I want to stress that the simple things of a budget are not complicated. The hardest part is doing them, right? Is actually taking the time to say, write it out, or use a cool budgeting software. Blake, you and I both use this program called YNAB. You Need a Budget. It's a great program. I have friends that use Excel, that use different apps on their iPhone. But you use any of these tools to help create the budget. But the budget process itself is not complicated. It's simply committing the time and the effort to do it.
Okay, cool. Well, you're very committed. It's not that complicated. It doesn't sound like it. The things I've heard you is your inflow, your outflow, and then within that outflow, you want specific categories. So Cam, as we try and wrap this up here, what's one action that someone should do right now if they say, okay, if it's not that complicated, cool, I'll give it a shot. Then what do they got to do? What's one thing they can do as soon as this video is over?
Yeah, it's simple. Print two things, okay? Print your last pay stub and print your last credit card or your debit card statement, however you spend money. Print it and then take some time to figure out, okay, money's coming in from here and the money's going out here. And if you do that over just simply last month, December's credit card statement, you'll probably find at least 15 to 20 different categories or different ways where you're spending money. And that's where you have to start. So don't think about your investments. Don't think, I got to save 20% or I need to save $10,000 to buy this thing. Don't think about that stuff yet. Do the first step of figuring out your inflow, figuring out some of your outflow, and realize that it's a process. And next month in February, you'll do the same thing for January statements and you'll see, oh, wow, we spent money on this that I had no idea we were spending money on. Add it to the list and begin to budget.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. That's good actions. Before we get off, I want to make sure we give anybody an opportunity to ask any questions further on in the chat or anything like that, or if anybody's got an experience
Definitely
that they want to share. I think you took. If I was asked that question of, okay, what's the one thing I got to do? I think that's where I'd start. I mean, I would just take a piece of paper and I would just say, okay, here's the money that I have, and then I would make my list of here's what I need to spend my money on before the next time I have money, before the next time I get paid, and then and then you just do what you just said, is you go from there. If there's any money left over, then you can think of something that you want to put that money towards, or hold on to it until you need it again. But I think that's great, Cam. I think so. That's good. I think you've kind of demystified it. You've kind of told your story about, when you started, it was overwhelming. You felt like it was this big thing. You've got to have it all together to do it. But you've made it really, really simple. And I appreciate you doing that. So it's to take that action of just getting an awareness of where you're at, and then you can make decisions based off of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add in and say there are 1 million and 2 million different financial books and budgeting books and strategies and all that kind of stuff. But that's down the road if you're not doing budgeting, like start with the simple thing of, inflow and outflow, like I just said. That's the takeaway. That's what's not complicated. And if you start doing those steps, all of the other stuff and the strategies will begin to make sense. But don't stress about that. Do not get overwhelmed. And the thing I like to harp on with my friends, I was riding in the car with one the other day, and recently married couple, and they were like, yeah, we just don't know where our money's going, and so we're trying to figure out a tool to use to do all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, hey, you have to sit down and make the time to do it. And you guys spend 40 hours a week individually, so 80 hours of your couple's life a week is spent working. And can you not commit 15, 30 minutes a week figuring out where all that hard-earned time and money is going and what you're going to do with it? And so that's the point I love to stress is don't work 40 hours a week and then not know what in the world you're doing with your time or money.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's good. I mean, we value it. We put all of our time and energy into it. It makes sense to take some steps to take accountability and be proactive in where it's going to go. So
yeah. Cool.
Well, Cam, I appreciate the time. Just to wrap up, hey, I'm Blake, and that is Cameron, and we blog at blakeandcameron.com, where we believe that your values and your goals are what should be driving what you do with your most precious resources, your time and your money. So thanks for joining us tonight. We'll stick around and talk a little bit more here. We're just going to stop the recording. So it's been great to be with y'all. Thanks.